Ms. Bonnie, how are you? We are not hearing you yet. But as I mentioned before, Bonnie is a lawyer
Janet,
with,
Janet,
hi,
hi,
how
can you
are,
hear me?
yes, I can. How are you?
Is the AC noise too loud? Should I turn it off?
No, I'm not hearing anything at all.
Oh, okay,
So
good.
you're fine.
Great.
But Bonnie, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, so we've got a little bit, we've got about 15 minutes here. So tell them really quickly about Tollner Law Offices.
Toner Law Offices is an aid attorney special education firm. We cover all of Southern California. We do all disabilities. We do IEP. We do, due process, regional center. We do ADA and 504 and university cases,
Okay.
and a little bit of other stuff too as it comes up. Um, so some stuff did come up. I know you said you
Yes.
have questions or no?
Well, everybody has questions, but it all stems around the same thing. It's just different circumstances.
Okay.
Everybody wants to know what to do now that they know what's happening with school.
Well, okay.
Basically,
First of
how
all,
do I?
I
Yeah.
would say I don't know what's happening because I don't believe that any set of circumstances we've had has remained the same black letter consistent policy for more than 2 weeks. But I will talk about some stuff that's come up recently. I don't know that it's going to get any traction, but apparently President Trump said that he's going to ask for Congress to let federal funds follow each child to private school if public schools aren't open. So I'm trying to decide how I feel about that. That's kind of interesting. Also hearing that school districts are reaching out to the federal government asking for protective legislation because they're anticipating an unprecedented amount of litigation as a result of school closure. Talked with a friend of mine this morning who's an attorney on the other side, who I like a lot and respect a lot, and she said it's never going to come to pass that the federal government will give those kinds of idea protections. So, that's her take on things. Had a question over the weekend about retention, which I've gotten asked about from time to time over the years, and districts have always been negative on the subject of retention. I'm finding some more willingness now for districts to consider retention, and there are pros and cons in terms of retention, sort of as a remedy, if you will. Retention became disfavored because it was being used as a way to sort of get around having an IEP that hadn't provided FAPE, because if it had, you wouldn't have had to be retained. That didn't really take into account, let's say, the fact that some kids with autism just developmentally needed another year, maybe more of same, maybe, let's say another year of kindergarten where it's not so academic and you have social time kind of, at the top of the agenda. But anyway, there's a lot of reasons why retention is disfavored, mainly because it's supposed to not be a substitute for a good solid IEP. But some parents now are asking about retention. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but I wanted to let everybody know that, that there's more willingness, more flexibility. School districts are also sometimes, throwing up their hands and caving. I had a mediation last week that, for reasons I can't really go into here, I thought they were going to give me a lot of pushback, and instead they said, okay, you got your receipts, you want reimbursement for that placement, and you want the distance learning program that your placement offers for fall 2020-21 school year. And, without kind of making it obvious that my jaw was on the ground, I said yes. And I realized that, they have no choice in a lot of situations, and they realize that they have no choice. So that might work to the advantage of some of you who want a residential placement or a non-public or a private school. In terms of what folks are doing in light of the announcement in California that many schools are going to be closed, and I'm not looking at it as indefinite, as 2 weeks, 4 weeks. I'm looking at it as first semester, for better, for worse, just given the way the infection is progressing in the state. So, as you said at the beginning, people want to know what to do in light of their individual circumstances. So the analysis, as far as I'm concerned, is what did your IEP provide for? What did your distance learning plan provide for? What did you actually get? How did your child respond to that? Did your child lose skills and lose ground? And if so, can you prove it? What kind of documentation do you have? What ways do you have to quantify the regression? And then you write a letter to the district. You tell them what you need for fall. You give them a time frame in which to respond. And when they don't respond, you file for due process to get compensatory education. If you're paying for compensatory education now, you need to give 10 business days notice if you want to sue for reimbursement. You have to do that. You just get out the calendar and count 10 business days. You write them a letter. You send it to the assistant principal of the school. You tell them why their offer wasn't FAPE and it wasn't appropriate during distance learning. And you give them your reasons for choosing the other alternative. And once you give them the 10 business days notice, although they have the option to convene an IEP meeting and try to offer you FAPE, it's unlikely that that will happen. And then you will have the ability, assuming the school district doesn't respond, to wait until your child has made progress in the private setting, and then you can sue for reimbursement. So that's sort of the larger template that, I'm going to customize to your individual circumstances, depending on the specific facts of your case and what kind of data you have. I was saying all spring, people, please, here's a cheat sheet for how to collect data on what you were supposed to get versus what you got. And, and please note, any progression or regression. And this is the reason why I was doing that. I was waiting for now. So we can take more questions about that on the air. I can take specific questions about that off the air. The other question I got on Friday that I just did a little looking into, if we have time, we could talk about it, or we could save it for another show if you have other things you want to talk about.
No, go ahead.
I had a parent contact me and say that their child was in a truly private school, not a non-public school, and they disclosed her child's IEP to a number of people without her permission, and she wanted to know what her remedies were. So I figured I should do a little something for Autism-Live on FERPA, the Federal Educational Records and Privacy Act. And so I've done that, and I'm going to talk to you about it, but I want to tell you first, the question I didn't really answer is what right of action does she have as a private school parent? Because according to the research I did, you can't sue under FERPA if you're a private school student, unless the entity receives funds from the federal government. So then the question is, what other privacy statutes would she be able to potentially use to sue? And, how good are her damages? And I really haven't finished the research, but I did learn some stuff about FERPA. So one of the things I learned about FERPA is that if you are, or your student is subjected to an unauthorized release of your privacy records and you're covered by FERPA, you have to bring a complaint within 180 days of the incident. So I sent you, Shannon, a little, just a website for people if they want to go and look at the U.S. Department of Education's FERPA resources. And then if we have time and you want to, we could talk about FERPA some more.
Yeah, let's, because, I think we all, I guess I'm a little naive, let's say that. Because I understand that my child has the right to privacy. And I can think of a very specific time a few years ago when somebody very publicly came up to us at a farmer's market, and they were actually visiting. We were at a booth at a farmer's market. There were probably 100 people standing around, and it was her sibling that it was their booth. And we had gone to this farmer's market booth forever, and my son would have conversations with the woman. Well, now the sister is there, and she said, "Oh my goodness," and said his name, and and said, "Oh, I didn't know you were here." And then the woman said, "How do you know him?" And she said, "Oh, well, I know him because I work with him at his school. He's in the autism program, and I'm not his aide. So and so is his aide." But said all of these things out loud, and I said, "No, no, 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 no." And she didn't, and then I think eventually she didn't catch on, but then eventually I said, "Stop." And everybody said to me I should have filed a complaint, I should have done, but
Well,
I
that's a
felt,
different situation because that's a right of action against a private citizen. That's even, less potentially meaty than suing a private school.
so tell us, like, what circumstances that we would need to file a FERPA. When would we do this? Why would we do this?
Well, you would do it if the state educational agency released records of your child's or the students without your permission. Okay, so
How would we know that they did that, I guess, is my next question.
well, okay, so I had a case a couple years ago where the kiddo went on Canvas, and apparently there was a page on Canvas that talked about her IEP and her diagnoses, and she found out she had autism.
Oh my goodness.
A teenager.
Oh.
She had no idea she had autism, and this occasioned a huge psychological,
Okay.
uproar, because all of a sudden she's dealing with, and that was part one of the case. Part two of the case was that the special ed teacher decided that it would be a good exercise for the students to learn about their accommodations. So she brought a copy of each kid's IEP to the learning center, or whatever the class was, a special day class. And she handed out like these 8 IEPs, and then she had each kid reading their accommodations from their IEPs.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So, that was a teacher that had been around a long time.
Wow.
And
she made no attempt to like redact who they were?
No, that case settled. And, and at the time, the parent and I thought that the amount of money that we were offered reflected a concern about that part of the case, maybe more than just the due process part.
Oh.
So those are experiences that I've had within the last year and a half.
Wow. Okay. I'm just always gobsmacked by stupidity. Okay. All right. So, and I've just sent over to Traven what you sent. So Traven, maybe you can put the link in the Facebook comments for what Bonnie sent us, and explain a little bit what that link takes us to, Bonnie.
Yeah, what that link is going to take you to is the federal Department of Ed's website on FERPA. And they have everything up there. They have guidance about how FERPA works. They have how to file a FERPA complaint. They have a lot of interesting trainings if you want to take actually a virtual training. And then I just kind of like stole the high points that are available about FERPA, and I could just sort of try to breeze.
You got about 2 minutes. Is 2 minutes enough time, or you want to wait for next week?
No, I think it's good, and if we'll see where we are. Anyway, it's a federal program. As we said, parochial and private schools aren't really subject to it because they don't receive federal funds. It gives, custodial and non-custodial parents rights with regard to their student records. When the student becomes 18, then the student becomes the holder of the FERPA rights. One of the things in FERPA is under the federal law, you have a right to request your students' records, okay, under FERPA, but it's much slower than in California. It's a 45-day process, not a 5-day process or 5 business days. And then the statute basically talks about what they aren't required to do. So, you might want to look at I could send my cheat sheet if you want, so that if you want to look at what things they aren't required to do or what things they aren't required to disclose to you, you have that available to you. FERPA was intended to require only that schools conform to fair record-keeping practices and not to override the accepted standards and procedures for making academic assessments, disciplinary rulings, or placement determinations. Thus, while FERPA affords parents the right to seek to amend education records which contain inaccuracies, this right cannot be used to challenge a grade. An individual's opinion or substantive decision made by a school about a student cannot be challenged under FERPA. Additionally, if FERPA's amendment procedures are not applicable to a parent's request for amendment of education records, the school is not required under FERPA to hold a hearing on the matter. So in that case I talked to you about, we were proceeding under FERPA because we were asking them to fix her friggin' online file and they wouldn't do it. They left it up. So that's one of the ways that people use FERPA, is they use it to challenge inaccuracies in educational records. But you're hearing here that is not going to mean you can do a grade challenge, which if people ever want to show on how to do a grade challenge, we can do one. But you can't use FERPA for that. And it just keeps going in terms of what they can disclose, who they can disclose to, that they have a requirement to give parents notice of their FERPA rights. That's usually going to be in the procedural safeguards that you get at the IEP, and so on. I mean, I'll send you my cheat sheet, and you guys can look at my cheat sheet, my FERPA cheat sheet. That's what I'm reading.
We are unfortunately out of time, but we so appreciate you, and we'll continue this conversation. And we want to remind everybody that you're with the Tollner Law offices, and that if they are in California, they should reach out to the Tollner Law offices in Southern or Northern California. Or Central, that's true. And if you're not in California and you're looking for legal assistance, Bonnie has a website that she recommends. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yeah, copaa.net. That's a 50-state database of special ed attorneys that I think are, good, committed, reputable people that are doing this for the right reason. Now, I do want to say that I think it's a really good way to learn about the IDEA if we talk about individual scenarios. So that means you guys have to send me for next week your individual scenarios, like what what you had, what you got offered, what happened, where you're at now, what you want to do. That will be helpful for other people, even if their facts are different.
All right. I was just sort of blending them all together, but I can separate them out and send them to you. Not a problem. Bonnie, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Anytime.
All right. Take care. Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.